I, who committed heinous crimes, will never die at the guillotine. Introduction. After working overtime and dying suddenly, I, Louis, accidentally traveled to the starry continent where gods roamed and hundreds of tribes stood, becoming the first emperor in the history of the Enshu Empire to rise to power as a prince with a foreign surname. At this moment, the imperial capital is in a sea of laughter, and I have made an indelible contribution to it. Because the revolutionary army is taking me to the guillotine. Accompanied by the fall of the trapezoidal sword, I ended my mindless life. It was supposed to be like this, but when I woke up again, I returned to before I was just crowned as a prince. Along with me came the diary I carried before my death, which recorded about my future. I, who have committed heinous crimes, will not die on the guillotine. I, Olivia, the second queen of the Enshu Empire, had just been reborn on the day of being enthroned as a prince of the kingdom of sorrow. As I witnessed the end of my queen's life and the collapse of the empire, I decided to give some color to the heinous Louis Charles Julius. Revitalizing the glory of the empire, the queen is dutiful. Chapter 1. The story starting from the guillotine. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Time. 14470 in the starry calendar, location. Empress of Enshu, Tino. Despite 7.6 million people settling in this bustling and crowded land, they have resorted to every means to ravage it into the political and economic center of the empire, despite the small countries adjacent to Ents mocking this land for being too extravagant and lacking humanistic sentiment, it still cannot stop many people's longing for this place. Because this is the capital of the three great empires of the human race, the Enshu Empire. Or rather, it used to be. In the afternoons of Tino City, it has always been rainy, and if we were to switch to normal, the hustle and bustle of the city would be extinguished. But today, no matter how heavy the rain is, it cannot stop the enthusiasm of the citizens of Tino. They rushed out of their homes with joy, bathed in the rain, minstrels playing instruments, ordinary citizens beating gongs and drums, welcoming this day worth celebrating. And our protagonist Louis made an indelible contribution to the laughter and joy of the people of Tino. Because the citizens below are running around to announce that he is about to be pushed to the guillotine. Louis held the diary in his arms and sat on the cold throne, looking down at the crowd below, cursing and feeling anxious. Louis, a Xia native. In the third year of junior high school, when the history teacher was reading the chapter about the National Revolution in the second volume of the People's Education Press, Louis's bad friends suddenly burst into laughter at him and asked him if his head was still there. From then on, the gears of fate began to turn. He never managed to escape the nickname Louis XVI in his lifetime. Louis doesn't matter, after all, he is from the great Xia, can he still enjoy the treatment of the guillotine? Time was like being stolen, and by the time he regained his senses, he had already been a bull and horse in the workplace for 2 years. After repeatedly overfulfilling tasks and being given saturated work by his skilled pancake drawing leader, he couldn't bear it anymore. After waking up from a late-night dream, he shouted towards the rainy night sky. Since you call me Louis, at least let me have the privilege of experiencing the treatment of the decapitated emperor. So. Pop. With a thunderous roar, I opened my eyes again and found myself in a different world. Louis is still the same Louis. However, in this lifetime, his name was Louis Charles Julius. It's just that. It's a bit unlucky. Louis. The most famous decapitated king. Charles. The first king to go to the guillotine and the 80-year-old crown prince. Julius. Caesar the Great who was assassinated. Let's put this stack of LGBT buffs aside. Why did it become like this? Louis held the diary in his arms, which was the only item of the original owner he found in the cell after crossing over. When he was arrested, out of the last trace of respect for the former emperor, he did not take away the diary that the original owner had been using. It is filled with the absurd life of the original owner. Looking at the crowd below with hatred in their eyes, the priest in front of him was still reciting his charges on stage. As a prince with a foreign surname who was granted the exclusive title of the first queen, Louis was extravagant and accumulated countless wealth, colluding with enemy assassins to assassinate the newly crowned first queen. The party united and opposed differences, forcibly occupying the imperial throne under the name of the fiancée of the first queen, and imprisoning the second queen, the heir of Ence, for 10 years. Due to unjust governance and excessive demands, Ence's national strength gradually declined, and the public's indignation continued. Today, under the gaze of all the citizens of Tino, Louis Charles Julius has been beheaded for puzzled country, Prince Charm, greedy appearance, and lightless emperor. Puzzled country, do you have anything else to say? You said you could stop me from going to the guillotine. It's funny. Tired, destroy it. Seeing that he was silent, the executing soldiers pulled him up from his chair and escorted him to the guillotine. He, who has no memory of the original owner, only wants to curse at others at this moment. Why don't I have my share in enjoying happiness, but the guillotine requires me to go up? Hey, confused country, don't move around. The executing soldier escorted him to the guillotine and smiled as he walked, saying, "Did you ever think that this day would come when you kicked me out of the SS using my right foot as a reason to step into the gate? Enough, execute it." A calm voice came from ahead, and Louis looked up at the woman. Grace Brent. The saint of the Church of Glory and Justice, a silver-white long-haired girl with black gauze over her eyes and a Libra sword in her hand. Born in the Enshu Empire, she was once a victim of Louis. Upon hearing about the Revolutionary Army, she devoted herself to the war against him for the suffering civilians. As usual, when he saw the white-haired girl, he was afraid that his DNA had moved, so he had to take a few more glances. But now, he can only calmly say, "If I say this has nothing to do with me, do you believe it?" The Virgin remained silent. Louis's tightly held diary seemed to be the only one that could give him some warmth. No begging for mercy. For the inevitable situation, he chose to use silence to defend his final self-esteem. In the end, the Virgin sighed lightly. "Goodbye, Emperor of Light, may you find your own value in the world after death." Suddenly, the scenery in front of me spun around. The hand holding the diary loosened, and the diary fell to the ground, stained red by the dripping blood. Louis Charles Julius, rest here forever. It should be like this. Help, help, help. Hiss, my head. Louis let out a cry of panic and fell off his luxurious bed. Head, head. Is the head still there? The fear of death still lingers in my mind. So when my head was just cut off, I could really feel the pain. Louis regained his senses in a daze and looked at his own body. The body, originally wrapped in dirty prison uniforms, is now covered in silky silk. My hands looked a bit thin and weak, like the hands of a boy who couldn't eat enough in a war-torn area. The maids, who were startled by the screams, ran in panic. "Your Highness, what happened? Are you injured? Is there an assassin? Hurry up and inspect your Highness." The maids looked at Louis with a somewhat dull gaze and anxiously fiddled up and down to check. Suddenly, a little maid's hand touched the wrong place. That was Louis's enchanting tail. The moment the tingling sensation came, Louis's face changed. With a pop sound, he pulled the tail back from the maid's hand and said with a fluffy voice, "Bold, let go of my tail." As soon as he finished speaking, a hint of confusion appeared on his face. What's going on? He's just an ordinary social animal who has just been on the guillotine. Why did he just develop such a strong anger? The influence of the original owner's residual soul? No, definitely not. He remembered the contents of the diary he had browsed before the guillotine. Is it the aftermath left by the original owner as an experimental subject at the White Tower Mage before becoming a prince? Damn it, Lord Daxi, even if he dies, he still causes trouble for me. The maids looked at each other. The little maid who had just attacked her tail had an awkward and aggrieved expression on her face. The poor reputation of the Mema clan is closely related to their peculiar gameplay with their tails. She just saw the tail wagging cute and instinctively grabbed it. How could she have thought Louis had such a big reaction? Seeing that the faces of the maids were a bit off, Louis couldn't help but recall the scene of the original owner's betrayal. In a daze, he seemed to hear the big knife sharpening towards him from the guillotine, his tail slowly pulling down like a warning. He sighed and said in a sincere but extremely serious tone. "Sorry, I really dislike people touching my tail." He just didn't notice that his face, which was haunted by the shadow of death, had a slight pallor on it, appearing exceptionally stubborn, like a small beast touched in an inviolable forbidden area. Inexplicably, the expressions of the maids changed from looking at each other to feeling softened. Rare. A demon that doesn't touch its tail. The little maid no longer felt aggrieved, but secretly looked at Louis with curious eyes. "Take a look. Take another look. Not good." The faces of the maids began to turn red. "Can you bring me a mirror?" Everyone nodded and exited the room. Quickly, a two-person high mirror was pushed into the room. Louis looked at the floor mirror. The young man in the mirror has delicate and upright facial features, his eyes as clear and pure as lake water, his hair black, and his clothes neat, but with a hint of dish color. It is somewhat out of place with his current luxurious attire. Louis said, "You guys go down first, I want to be quiet." Louis roughly guessed what the situation was. He glanced at the time on the magic clock in the bedroom. The starry calendar is 14,450 years old. Zhaozuiyuan.com. There is a 20-year gap between the year when I was guillotined on stage in my dream. Is it time to travel and then be reborn? Or do I foresee the future? Or is it just an absurd dream? He groped his neck. The residual pain and fear of the head landing are gradually dissipating. A sense of peace of mind permeates the whole body. From a temporal perspective, Louis should have been brought into the palace by the First Lady and become an honorary prince. This overall art style leans towards the medieval world, which is not safe. The interweaving of ignorance and civilization, unaware of war. Gods, abyssal lords, devil archdukes, and other high-dimensional beings use the starry continent as their chessboard and have been fighting tirelessly since ancient times. Fortunately, when Louis was first crowned as honorary prince, the Enshu Empire was still strong and there was no need to consider any external crises. Whether that memory is true or false, at least it's safe now. A sense of peace gradually permeated, and he fell onto the bed, suddenly being penetrated by something behind him. That is a diary with a slightly yellowed cover. Louis has seen it, and it is the diary that the original owner carried with him. At that time, he had just crossed into the prison cell, and only this diary remained by his side. The original owner wrote many things in the diary, allowing him to have a preliminary understanding of the situation in this world. Is there a certain discrepancy between the content in the diary and the content that the original owner was sentenced to? Looking at the diary cover covered in dried blood, his hands suddenly trembled. That sticky feeling, as I flipped through the mottled page, filled me with resentment, mournful cries, and fear of the guillotine. Louis, who had finally calmed down, shook his hand and the diary fell to the ground. Sending, it's true. Chapter 2. The sick princess decides to revive the glory of the empire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Meanwhile, within the palace. Olivia, the second queen of the Enshu Empire, once again stopped her favorite sister and said seriously, "Sister Wang, please promise me." Looking at her sister's bewildered expression, she instinctively looked towards the direction of the prince's mansion outside the palace. She will never allow that person to harm her sister again. Beatrice, the next heir appointed by the empire, doted on her head and said helplessly. He has already been crowned as a prince, Olivia. Are you telling me this now to show outsiders a joke about our royal family? Beatrice couldn't believe how her sister would say such foolish words as, depose Prince Louis. This matter was passed by her father, the emperor, and ministers, despite her strong opposition to public opinion, and has even been publicly announced. Now let's talk to her about this, you're really crazy. But the sweet and crisp voice of the young girl rang out, Sister Wang, I feel like you've been captivated by that enchanting demon. A hint of anger flashed on the face of the female official standing next to Beatrice. She instinctively took a step forward, but was stopped by the queen. The first queen squinted at her sister, who had always been known for her softness and silence. Her crimson eyes, like her own, carried a resolute color, her rosy lips were tightly bitten by silver teeth, and her neatly trimmed golden shawl hair fell like a waterfall, like a proud little swan. Little Swan seemed to sense her sister's hesitation, relying on Wang's liking for her and constantly shaking her hand. Sister, Enzer is a country dominated by humans, and also the main force of the order camp, right? Yes. Prince Louis is not a nobleman, it's just a surviving test item that you bought from the White Tower mage, right? Yes. There has never been a mixed-race demon holding a high position in history, right? That's right. The allies on the order side will question our position, the old nobles will criticize his bloodless prince status, and the nobility and purity of the royal family will be shaken. Compared to these losses, the reputation damage caused by his expulsion is not worth mentioning. Beatrice looked at Olivia in surprise and suddenly smiled, in principle, it is. Olivia was a bit agitated and took a step forward. So, Sister Wang, please let Enzer leave for the sake of his future. But I don't agree. Beatrice rejected her proposal without hesitation. Why, Sister Wang? However. Faced with her sister's stunned expression, Beatrice smiled and said. Because that's exactly what I want. Not from a noble background, which means he has no connection with the old aristocrats. The lowly status of the experimental subjects is not only comparable to ordinary citizens, but also inferior to the poor. Life and death are determined by people. Such people can all receive my support, so as long as we cultivate Louis well, more people will believe that the royal family is willing to give ordinary people the opportunity for promotion. There has never been a foreign surname in history, especially the hybrid demon who held a high position in the empire, which means his real power can only be achieved through me. And as the first princess of Enzer, I am able to escape the harassment of those pursuers who pursue my identity, and save an experimental object that may die at any time in a magic experiment. Why not do it? Olivia only felt her head itch, as if she was about to grow a brain. Beatrice gave a mischievous smile and unfolded her folding fan, hiding her beautiful face. Of course, there is also the most important reason. What else? Why didn't she know that person was so good, but she still took the initiative to ask, what is it? He looks upright and good-looking. I like him, and he looks decent when taken out. Olivia opened her mouth, unable to refute for a moment. How did she forget that her own sister Wang is a serious beauty dog? She can look for that man in various ways, but only in terms of masculinity. That guy is truly worthy of the name, confusing the country. This cat was scolded and warned by Sister Wang, and she actually felt that what she said was very reasonable. But only she knows how much trouble that man will bring. She will never allow Wang Jie to lean towards the Tiger Mountain trip. Seeing that Wang was about to leave, Olivia instinctively took a step forward to explain, but was stopped by the female official. But she still said loudly, at least verify if he has the qualifications to become your husband. Beatrice, with her back to her sister, snapped away her folding fan. Olivia shouted loudly upon seeing this. Wang Jie, let's conduct a special trial for him that is suitable for the prince. If it's really not suitable, you can listen to my opinion again. She had long guessed that Wang would not compromise so easily, so her initial goal was not to directly kick out the confusing country. Sure, you can handle the matter of the prince's training course, and I will supervise it. The little swan's face showed a hint of joy. It's done. Louis Charles Julius, I said I must give you some color to see. Yes, our little swan is also abnormal. Because she is a reborn person. Olivia was the second queen of the Enshu Empire, born weak due to some unknown elemental disease, and spent years recuperating in the palace. Fortunately, Ensur has money. Among the three great empires of humanity, Ens, as the oldest empire, has a rich heritage, and raising a sick princess is not a problem. Previously, her relationship with Louis was not good or bad. After all, every time he comes back from going out, he always brings her a small gift. Although she is not lacking. Zhaozuiyuan.com tell her stories about the outside world. Although she always likes to tell some vulgar and repulsive jokes. But due to her illness, she doesn't often go out. Apart from Sister Wang and the maid, there are not many people who can speak. But it wasn't until Wang Jie was assassinated that he ascended to the throne, and their relationship completely deteriorated. When she went to ask Louis about the situation, he waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about this matter. If you're not feeling well, just rest and recuperate in the palace." Then she was taken back to the palace by Wang's guards and placed under house arrest. Olivia, people are all foolish. How did he even control his personal guards after only a few days? He is just an honorary prince, without real power, no fiefdoms, and his subordinates have little interest. Where did he get so many loyal subordinates? I'm afraid I'm not being bewitched by this enchanting demon. The title of Louis, Puzzled Country, began with the incident of Olivia. In this way, she became a caged bird and was placed under house arrest in the palace for 10 years. Occasionally, Louis would bring her some gifts and tell her about what was happening in the empire when he returned from his travels. Later, with the support of the disabled party, she escaped from the Enshu Empire and traveled for several years. By chance, she solved her own physical problems. However, when she returned to Enshu, she saw Enshu, who was engulfed in war, and Louis, who was taken to the guillotine. And then she died. What? You voluntarily applied to develop a prince training course. Click. As the bedroom door closed, Olivia watched as her maid's long face visibly stiffened. The two looked at each other in silence. Your Highness, you are confused. Chapter 3. If I can't drive away from the country of puzzlement, why don't I go to the countryside to feed pigs? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Your Highness, you are confused. The young maid, Long Lumi, placed her hands on her shoulders, her expression somewhat broken, and she couldn't help but wonder if her mind was flooded. Regardless of whether His Highness Louis is qualified in the end, Lord Beatrice will leave resentment in his heart. She had a crazy expression on her face, so she went to help Wang Nu prepare the medicine she needed to take today. Who would have thought this would happen? They have become a couple, and your sister will think that you have obstructed her marriage, and His Highness Louis will also remember you. If they don't succeed, you will also be the culprit behind their hard work and separation, and your situation will become even more awkward. What on earth did you think that led to your own fate? Olivia's shaking head made her dizzy, and she said pitifully, I was wrong. Let's just stop for a moment. Lumi's face was filled with regret. Her family is a servant family that has served the Enshu royal family for generations, thriving alongside the royal family. In history, there has even been an empress. Olivia's birth mother left early, and before the queen's death, she repeatedly instructed her to take care of her sick daughter. Over the years, she has been both a sister and a mother, providing advice to the innocent and romantic second princess on a daily basis. It was unexpected that she would have been involved in the affairs of the couple without any plan. Blame me, if I were more cautious and gave you a little more warning, I wouldn't have caused this. Lumi looked dejected. The fact that the first queen is in charge of the empire has become a foregone conclusion. Being an empress and a queen are two different things. The empress's slight dissatisfaction landed on the person below, who was also a big mountain. Even if that person is Olivia, it has to be guarded against. Seeing Lumi's dejected expression, Olivia became even more excited. This is not perfect. Who cares about the favorable impression of confusing the country? She was finally reborn just to give this bastard some color to see. If she doesn't deal with this big disaster, why don't she go to the countryside to feed pigs? However, she also knew that she couldn't show her attitude so clearly. Even if she wanted to expel Louis, she had to take a reasonable path. She suppressed a smile and talked to Louis about her considerations when talking to Wang Nu. She patted her good mate on the shoulder and said, "Louis, it's not that I'm scheming, but if I don't show my attitude to Sister Wang in this way, she'll think I'm being petty and won't take it seriously. Didn't you always trust my intuition? I don't think that succubus looks like a good person. Believe me, when the prince's trial comes, he will definitely reveal his prototype. Sister Wang will definitely understand my difficulties and will not have any impact." That's weird. Speaking these words, Olivia herself felt a bit guilty. Ents is an old empire, and no matter what, constantly changing orders will inevitably have an impact on the royal family. Considering the destructive power of confusing the country, she can only do a multiple-choice question. Is it to allow the problem to expand or to solve the aftermath as soon as possible? Witnessing the end of the prosperity of the Enshu Empire with her own eyes, Wang Jie's death, 10 years of house arrest, and execution on the guillotine, she was deeply saddened by how she could continue to let go. In this life, she will never allow tragedy to happen again. Thinking of this, she began to have a little calculation in her heart. How can I trick you? Suddenly, she remembered the event that triggered the prelude to the imperial turmoil 6 months later. Got it. The next day, Louis woke up from the king's bed. He has already preliminarily sorted out the current situation, especially through his diary. This diary is strange and cannot be seen by ordinary people, let alone touched by people outside of him, which relieved Louis of some of his worries. The content inside gave him a rough understanding of the challenges he needs to face next. Firstly, it is his relationship with Beatrice. To put it more accurately, the relationship between the original owner and his first wife is subordinate. Wang Nu was tired of the entanglement of various interest groups who coveted her body and the position of the empire. She was urged by various ministers to find a controllable partner that she didn't dislike. Louis appeared to be the failed experimental body of a certain experiment by the White Tower mage, but in fact, it may be the only successful case. In order to avoid being sliced by the mages, Louis has been hiding himself in the experimental body. Until Beatrice discovered his potential through some means and met him, the two of them hit it off. The original owner served as the prince and became her secret guard, helping her block those annoying heirs. And Wang Nu provides security for the original owner and explores their potential. Even as long as he doesn't commit any principled issues, Beatrice can provide him with peace of mind. It seems that we need to become stronger as soon as possible. There are quite a few people who crave a big wife. Secondly, Louis's accession to the throne was greatly problematic. The relationship between Louis and Beatrice is not a real couple, involving the continuation of the empire. How could the queen be unprepared at all? In fact, according to the original owner's record in the diary, when Wang Nu was seriously injured and dying, she actually acted as a backup. This includes but is not limited to a series of policies, such as establishing the documents for the succession of the two princesses, appointing Louis as regent to escort Olivia, and allowing his confidants to assist the two as much as possible in stabilizing the imperial order. When Louis came to his senses, he had already worn a yellow robe and ascended to the throne as emperor. This illogical inheritance is the root cause of the turmoil of the Enshu Empire for the next decade. There must be some mystery in this matter. JPG, I need to find a way to save my eldest wife's life and make her ascend to the throne smoothly, so that I can at worst live a life of lying flat. Of course. The overthrow of the original owner is not simply a matter of improper positioning. Because he is such a person, he is nothing but personal scum, and he has even made many jokes. For example, after finally turning around, He started playing zero-yuan shopping in the imperial capital, taking things freely without paying, and had the shop owner directly send the bill to Beatrice. For example, when a tax official informs that the national treasury is empty in hopes that Louis will be frugal, Louis opens his mouth and says, "After I die, who cares about floods?" For example, in the Great Famine 10 years later, when the local government hoped for a solution from the royal family, Louis lost his mind and said, "If there is no meat to eat, why not eat bread?" What's even more despicable is that the powerful minister who helped him wear a yellow robe got married. At the engagement banquet, it's normal for the emperor to take out some treasures from the treasury and send them over. The original owner also gave it as a red envelope, which contained a white note reading, "Lend XX silver coins." Yes, you read it right, it's a white note. It's borrowing. And you don't even need to settle in gold coins. Louis single buckle a 6. Granddad always praises you for coming. Capitalists should think of you as a devil. Oh my God, why did the original owner persist for 10 years before he lost his country? Enzu's family is still rich. But one thing is certain, being an emperor is impossible, professional matters are left to the eldest wife to handle. Louis quickly set the policy of protecting the top thigh and moving forward to a flat life. To improve your strength, you need to take it slow. First, you need to see why your first wife is so easily assassinated. He immediately remembered the Tino explosion incident recorded in his diary. This happened about half a year later when the national waste treatment plant in the capital suddenly exploded, causing flames to blast the entire plant into the sky. A large number of workers died on the spot, and the fire in the western part of the capital persisted. Later, Beatrice went to investigate and found out that this was not a natural disaster. Finding the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com was a human error. The factory director is a huge greedy person. In recent years, only half of the waste treatment equipment that should have been iterated has been replaced, and it is basically unable to meet the growing demand for household waste treatment in the imperial capital. This person relies on the garbage dump to operate around the clock, barely allowing the factory to handle the garbage on weekdays and maintain a clean surface. However, the White Pagoda Mage was authorized by the royal family to conduct multiple large-scale magic experiments in the past 6 months, resulting in a huge amount of magical waste. These waste materials are sent to the processing plant for processing in batches, but the equipment in the processing plant is old and cannot be fully processed even after rotation. Seeing that he was about to lose control, he deceived and fabricated information, piling up unseparated magical waste in the dungeon. The reason why these waste materials need to be disposed of as soon as possible is because there are significant safety hazards. This accumulation, from minor hazards to major hazards, ultimately led to a major explosion. The processing plant is shut down, and a large amount of household waste cannot be processed. What's even more deadly is that the toxic odor from the reaction of elements has permeated half of the capital, even permeating underground water, polluting many residents and causing them to be poisoned. You should know that this is a fantasy world, and there are also professions like druids. This group of wandering nature conservationists heard about this and gathered in anger, infiltrating the city of Tino to investigate and cause trouble. Enshu could not have allowed these brainwashed environmentalists to meddle in his own internal affairs. As the conflict between the two sides intensifies, the security in the imperial capital has declined by more than 1 point. This triggered a chain reaction of subsequent events, becoming the fuse for the imperial capital's protection to be pierced. So, do we need to address the hidden dangers of the Big Bang? Thinking of this, Louis's eyes lit up. This question has a solution. Chapter 4. Great Crimes. Greed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The solution diary also records it. This matter was handled by Beatrice and Louis. At that time, Beatrice recruited a large number of slimes to first dispose of the city's household waste. A famous businessman discovered that his slime could easily handle the garbage contaminated by experimental waste, so he volunteered. That slime is said to be a rare slime he bought in the second-hand trade market in the imperial capital a few months ago, and it has been left in a neglected corner for several years without being sold. No one expected that slime, which only beginners adventurers would use to practice, had the ability to digest magical waste among its special individuals. This slime even underwent transformation in pollution treatment, splitting into more special individuals. Through these special individuals, this merchant's chamber of commerce took advantage of the east wind to further expand and quickly became a new wealthy businessman in the imperial capital. It is worth mentioning that when the city of Tino was attacked by the Revolutionary Army, this businessman, who had taken off with the support of the Enshu Empire, was the first person to voluntarily open the door and serve as a guide for the Revolutionary Army. What? Is this guy responsible for causing me to have no head or mind? What else is there to say? Go for it, I have taken your slime. Location: Office of the Minister of the Imperial Seal in Tino City. Louis glanced awkwardly at his nominal wife Beatrice. She sat upright in the chair, her slender long legs overlapping, and her hands supporting her chest, both playful and imposing. Do you want to go to the second-hand market for a stroll? Louis's eyes were involuntarily hooked by his slender and fair legs, stretching from black high heels to the jade feet under his skirt, creating a perfect curve. But he quickly shifted his gaze. He didn't forget that this first wife is not a real wife. Does it look good? Louis was about to say that I didn't look, but seeing her provocative gaze with a hint of threat, he calmly said. It looks good, it's quite eye protective. Then sit down and take a look. Louis said as if giving up. Don't, Your Highness. I'm just an unlucky person who survived from the experimental body of the White Tower. I just want to live well. He didn't really think he had an agreement with Beatrice, so he really thought he was equal to her. He needs to maintain clarity and restraint. So he glanced again. He felt like crying without tears. Damn it, the side effects of this experiment on White Tower were too great. Beatrice opened the folding fan, hid her smile, and said in a demonic tone. Just show it to you, Buick. Louis scratched his head. Doesn't it look like a probe? The transformation from a wizard experiment that cannot be guaranteed human rights to an imperial prince, although it is a matter of reputation, is also quite outrageous, like NM dreaming. He thought about it all night last night but couldn't figure out what advantages he had besides having a beautiful face to choose from. As the first queen of this ancient empire, there are too many suitors for Beatrice. Descendants of important imperial officials. The eldest son of a prestigious family with a longer family background than the empire. The young master of a renowned top chamber of commerce in mainland China. Even there are many inheritors from other races who come to visit and study in the empire, outside of the human race. With so many top candidates, she didn't look up to any of them. Instead, while inspecting the White Tower mage, she caught a glimpse of him, who had abandoned the experimental body. It's really confusing. Your process is still going on, and the allowance will not be delivered to you with the prince's necessities until 2 days later. How much do you need? I'll give it to you. Louis recalled the regular price of slime on the market and extended 3 fingers. 30, Beatrice nodded and said, 30 coins. Lyra, take some money from my private vault. Wait, it's 30 silver. Beatrice tilted her head to look at the female official next to her. Get more coins. The female official bowed and withdrew. Louis. He intended to refuse, but as soon as he was about to speak, a strong reluctance flashed through his heart. It's only 30 gold coins. Don't speak up. If you speak up, you won't have that much money. A almost uncontrollable regret filled his heart. Fortunately, Louis had a strong willpower and suppressed it. He once again lamented, actually, it's 30 silver coins. He is a bit embarrassed and distressed. This sudden greed always makes him feel like the guillotine is moving closer to him with a resounding sound. He sounded the alarm bell loudly. No way. Never owe a debt. He must overcome the impact of the White Tower experiment on his body. So he added, after the salary comes down, I will pay it back. In fact, if it weren't for ensuring a relaxed budget, he wouldn't even need 30 silver coins. After all, what kind of garbage is slime? Challenge Level 1 monsters. The reason why it can be Level 1 is because the lowest level is only Level 1. Belonging to the level of being able to bully underage children, no matter how rare, 10 silver coins are also sky-high. After a moment of silence, Beatrice suddenly smiled and said, "Don't restrain yourself too much, you are the only successful case of a major crime experiment. To awaken the power of greed, one needs to learn to release their greed." Louis shook his head and said, "Uncontrolled greed will lead to the path of destruction. My greed for money is not as heavy as you think, and I can still restrain it. Great crime. Greed, it is precisely because he is so precise now. This is the ultimate product that the White Tower experiment aims to achieve. Mages are a group of tireless seekers who explore the origin of the world. The power of gods dares to peak, and the power of demons is also not spared. The demons of the bottomless abyss are able to advance through the bloody battles of the abyss, relying on the power of great sins flowing in their own origins. This is the conclusion drawn by the White Tower mages. Arrogance. Jealousy. Fury. Laziness. Greed. Overeating. Lust. The power of the 7 major sins mutually conquers, devours, and expands in the abyss bloodshed. The number of demon deaths caused by each abyssal bloody battle is even comparable to the population of a medium-sized country. The demons that survive under the blending of the 7 major sins will also activate the power of the major sins, and their strength will increase explosively. The White Pagoda mages adhered to this concept and initiated the experiment of Great Sin. Later, the mages discovered that the stability of the mixed and stacked power of the Great Sin was extremely poor, and it was even more difficult to absorb as it was beyond the control of the abyss. In the end, the mages decided to reduce the difficulty first. They killed over 100,000 demons and used special methods to collect fragments of the concept of Great Sin. Greed. At the same time, in order to further improve stability, the mages transformed the experimental body into a demon hybrid. Louis's demonic bloodline also came from this. You should know that there is no such thing as a male succubus in the abyss. Even if an ordinary male demon chooses to advance to a succubus, he will directly change his gender. To some extent, the existence of Louis is quite rare. However, even with demon-blooded experimental subjects, they still failed to achieve the expected results of the White Tower. Zhaoshuyuan.com. In the end, due to excessive cost, the Ents royal family ordered the temporary termination of this experiment. It is said to be a temporary termination, but in reality, it is an indefinite suspension. Beatrice happened to be in the White Tower to learn about the progress of related spell experiments and met the original owner Louis. She sensed the possibility hidden in Louis through some means, and coincidentally, she was really annoyed by those thick-skinned second-generation people recently, so she rescued him. This matter can be considered a secret that only 2 people know. As Beatrice said, in order to be activated, one needs to release the dark side of one's greed. The original owner's operation was quite simple, with endless greed for wealth. In the past life, there must be one for the street lamp pendant. Under the influence of the great crime, greed, he went to the guillotine without any reason. Send it. Whoever loves to release will release. Anyway, I won't do it. Just as the thought came to his mind, he seemed to hear the sound of the trapezoidal knife rubbing against it. So he made an excuse and said, "With your help, I have been employed as a level 1 warrior. I have a certain plan on how to develop the power of greed. Lord Beatrice, there is no power beyond control, and you don't want the object you have worked hard to rescue to lose control, do you well, Louis is, having a certain contingency plan and telling the author that a new book is being written, is a principle. Beatrice looked at him in surprise and suddenly smiled. As long as you have the numbers, I'm really worried that you won't consider anything else in order to quickly improve your strength. If that's the case, then you can only be a partner. Ah. Chapter 5. Sorry, I'm not here at the right time. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ah. Louis's face was full of question marks. What is, can only be used as a partner? Louis's gaze turned to her, and she smiled at his somewhat bewildered expression. Is it strange? You were chosen by me. Even if I want to get rid of those annoying people, I shouldn't just find someone to stop the gun. The premise of choosing someone must at least meet my basic criteria for choosing a spouse. It seems that I have a good eye for talent. Suddenly, Louis seemed to understand something and instinctively swallowed his saliva. Hidden plot. The emotional protagonist has always had a cooperative and defensive relationship with Beatrice in his diary, purely because he was not qualified and was eliminated at the beginning. That's it. No wonder he was nailed to his collaborator status until Wang Nu died. No wonder the diary always uses Lord Beatrice instead of calling her wife. Louis thought it was because the original owner was so honest that the relationship was rejected at the beginning. Giving you a chance is not worth it. But Louis quickly regained consciousness and looked at Beatrice, saying with some bitterness. Don't think too much, I can restrain myself, just crave to live peacefully. I won't be pushed to the guillotine again. His eyes were a bit loose, and Beatrice seemed to see some emotion in his eyes, as if it was fear. Her gaze softened even more. Don't worry, even if the White Tower discovers the problem, they won't be able to touch you now. She mistakenly understood Louis's fear as a consequence of the White Tower experiment. Louis regained his senses and instinctively nodded, only to realize that she was referring to the White Tower, rather than the guillotine. What the two of them said was not right. But what's funny is that it really caught on with the radio waves. However, after some thought, Louis was right. The White Tower was also considered a threat. Is there any way to improve your career level? Beatrice nodded and said, Level 1 warrior, in the Empire, even ordinary adventurers, you're about level 3 at your age. However, it's also true that you have lived in the White Tower for many years, but you don't have the opportunity to improve your career level. I have arranged for you to receive guidance from the royal family, and he will guide you in your cultivation. First, let's see if you can learn the 9 swords of the Ents royal family. Louis was overjoyed. Unexpectedly, there was an unexpected joy. That would be even better. Beatrice thought of something and suddenly stood up close to Louis, her slender figure leaning forward. Louis instinctively stepped back. She had a funny expression on her face and lifted his face, saying, As a price, I hope you can agree to one condition. Ah. Call me Beatrice, don't call me adults. Louis, do you want someone to discover our transaction? He could feel the breathing between Beatrice's lips and teeth, with a faint threat in her voice. Louis held his breath and nodded, Beatrice. Then, she smiled. My mood suddenly improved. That's right, it should be like this. At this moment, the door of the minister in charge of the imperial seal rang out with 3 taps, and the door was pushed open. The female official who had just left walked in, half of her foot frozen in mid-air, watching as her own queen was blocking Prince Louis in a corner. She instinctively withdrew her feet outside the door. Sorry, I didn't come at the right time. Bang! The door closed again. After a moment, the door opened again. The female official walked in angrily and grabbed Beatrice, taking a step back. Your Highness, as your auxiliary female official and etiquette manager, I must remind you that you and His Highness Louis have not yet been officially engaged. Please maintain the proper etiquette of the royal family. Beatrice chuckled and was pulled to the back by her. The female official's serious expression turned towards Louis, whose face was somewhat confused. Confirmed, it must be Lord Beatrice who did something good. She gently pulled Louis to the side and sat down, then handed a bag of gold coins to Beatrice. Your Highness, here you are. After Beatrice took it over, she turned her head to look at Louis and said. I heard the maid say, it seems like you don't like people touching your tail. Louis nodded. He is not a natural succubus, and the feeling of having an extra limb is already a bit uncomfortable. Don't let anyone touch it well. Beatrice smiled happily, her gaze following Louis's swaying little tail behind her, and after a moment, she said. In your prince's trial, I will ask Olivia to add you to the 9 swords cultivation. Also, if you want to go to the second-hand market later, don't hesitate to spend money. Beatrice took out 100 coins from a bag and handed them over, saying, take the flowers. 30 silver coins are enough. Louis had just said, but then he realized that his hand had unconsciously taken the gold coin, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Good, you greedy. Also, isn't it 30 gold coins? How did you give more? Bad woman, you want me to go to the guillotine, right? This is the pocket money your lovely and beautiful fiancé A.E. gave you. I'm happy today, just take it and spend it obediently. 1 gold coin equals 100 silver coins equals 10,000 copper coins. The purchasing power of 1 silver coin is almost equivalent to the 100 yuan banknote of the previous Xia dynasty. Beatrice's bag. 1,000,000 yuan pocket money. He couldn't help but think of an emoji in his mind. The life you dream of. JPG Louis's mouth twitched slightly, and he opened his mouth, trying hard to refuse. But just the thought of returning the money spreads the heart-wrenching pain. The grip on the money bag became tighter. The power of greed is resisting his will. Hush. This thing is a bit too scary. Seeing Beatrice looking at him with a smile on her face, she didn't intend to retrieve the money from the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com, so she could only sigh and say. I'll take the money and keep it for you. You won't spend it recklessly. Beatrice's smile became even brighter. Bring a personal guard when you go out and ask him to help you carry it. Louis nodded. Safety first. Just as he walked out and saw the personal guard, his right foot froze and the swaying little tail behind him suddenly trembled. Countless memories seemed to surge out of my mind. Hey, confused country, don't move around. Have you ever thought about this day when you kicked me out of the SS because I stepped into the door with my right foot? The words echoed back and forth. He instinctively took a step back. Re is the soldier who pressed him to the guillotine. Your Highness Louis, this is William Shawn, a loyal and brave Iron Guard with a class level of 11. He will accompany you on the street later. How could Louis not know? When he was holding on to himself, it hurt a lot. As mentioned in the diary, this person was initially arranged as a personal guard by the original owner's side. At that time, the original owner was still a prince. In the first few years after escaping from the White Tower, he occasionally had nightmares, to the point where he would wake up with a strong sense of wakefulness. During a patrol with Beatrice, this personal guard took on a mission early in the morning and asked him to give a report. At that time, Louis, who was feeling very angry when he woke up, was in a bad mood. He used his right foot to step into the door as an excuse, and after some humiliation, he was directly expelled from the queue. Louis was shocked when he read his diary. There is no need for such a thing. Chapter 6. The operation of prizing the corner. Your slime is in my shape now. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chinwei, this is an iron rice bowl. After normal retirement, it can be said that he doesn't have to worry about food and drink. Because of this, he was directly kicked out of the queue, and he was not willing to be replaced. No wonder when I was holding myself so hard. Otherwise, we won't retaliate against him. But it really hurts. Not only the problem of being violently detained by him, but also the phantom pain of the guillotine falling when I see him. Just thinking back one more time, his teeth were about to break. He nervously hugged his tail and looked at him with a wary expression. Guard William looked at the prince inexplicably, and the female official next to her misunderstood something. She coughed and reminded him. William, His Highness Louis is different from the succubus. He doesn't like others to touch his tail casually. William suddenly realized. He can understand, and he doesn't like others touching his sword. So he patted the scabbard and took a step forward, saying, I understand, Your Highness. This sword is not broken, and no one will touch Your Highness's tail, poop, or tail. Go away. Hold your sword and stay away from me. Louis held his tail tighter. You laughed just now. You definitely laughed. Can I punch him in the face? The female official added softly, he is now your personal guard. If you make your request to him, if it is reasonable, he may agree directly. Louis. Can I sentence him to death? William suppressed a smile and said, Your Highness, I have received professional training. If my sword doesn't protect you well, you can be sentenced to death. The two did not take Louis's joke seriously. After all, whose boss would hold his own tail and become angry while really sentencing someone to death? William not only didn't feel threatened, but also felt my own prince really has a youthful vibe. Louis is dull and tasteless. If the personal guard were to be arrogant and domineering, he might have really convinced his conscience not to appear in his sight. But they directly gave a promise with a smile to humiliate my lord and die. He only felt that angels and demons were at war in his mind. Angel Road. Louis, are you really going to drive the person directly? What's the difference between you and the scumbag? Devil's Road. He doesn't really dislike you, but he hurts you. The more he endures for a while, the more he thinks, the more he gets angry. Are you really willing? Suddenly, Louis's eyes lit up. Why can't we take a dual approach and find a way that won't offend him and can make me vent my anger? Got it. The next moment, he had the answer in his mind. After Beatrice's side is ready, you can wait. Thinking of this, he wore a comfortable smile on his face, and the little tail in front of him also shook happily. William's corner of his eye caught a glimpse of this scene, and he felt a little relieved in his heart. It seems like it's just a joke. He's a very easy person to get in touch with. Doesn't he like the charm that makes people touch their tails? William looked at Louis holding his tail. I heard that His Highness used to be the experimental subject of the White Tower. Did he leave a shadow in the past? He suddenly felt that Louis was a bit pitiful. Your Highness, I'm not joking. The sword is not broken yet, and no one will touch Your Highness's tail. William swore with his sword in his hand. Soon, Louis and William, who had changed into casual clothes, arrived at the second-hand market. Your Highness, do you want to buy second-hand props? William whispered. No, just stroll around first. Also, William, if we're out now, just call me Louis. Louis walked slowly with a bag of apples in his arms. The second-hand market mainly refers to a street of street stalls in the imperial capital. There are not many stores listed here, but more places for adventurers and residents to sell second-hand products that are not very needed. Based on time, that special slime should still be selling here at this time. Due to the large population of the imperial capital, even if it's just selling second-hand products, with the help of the people from the capital, it's really bustling and bustling. Louis suddenly said. Relax, William. There are very few people who have seen me now, so don't be so nervous. There are quite a few adventurers wandering here. William has been on the alert all along, and his sharp gaze has instead made Louis, who was originally planning to sneak over to buy slime, the focus of some people's attention. Seemingly realizing that he was more dangerous, William released his hand that had been gripping the hilt of the sword. Louis just smiled and handed him a washed apple. As he walked along, he suddenly understood why in his diary, the original owner would say that the merchant was purely unlucky. Because there are over a dozen street vendors selling slime on this carpet. Louis walked up to a stall and squatted down, poked Slim's soft and sticky face, and asked the vendor. "Boss, can you also take out Slim and sell it?" The shopkeeper looked up and lazily said, 50 copper coins, just take them with you. William reminded in a low voice, "Young master, when a demon is captured, it is usually used as a summoning beast to serve as a sub-profession of a spell-based mage. Slime is not strong, has not many functions, and even the output rate of magic cores is extremely low, which is not within the scope of ordinary mages' purchases. I bought this thing just to clean up." The shopkeeper smiled and said, "Slim can digest a lot of residue. Sometimes when the drain gets clogged, throw one in and in a few days, the drain will be as good as new. Who would buy slime if it weren't for this?" Louis said, "Is slime here always eating leftovers and sewage garbage?" The shopkeeper said, "That's not the case. If it's not for the convenience of raising it, who would raise it and sell it?" Louis nodded and placed an apple on the surface of the slime. Quickly, the apple was swallowed and digested by slime. Louis stood up until he saw the apples being digested. "Not enough digestion speed, not that slime," the shopkeeper murmured, "You're quite kind." Louis remained silent and got up to the next vendor with slime. He patiently tried them one by one. William, who was following behind him, watched the scene quietly and his mood suddenly became somewhat complicated. He felt ashamed to have previously suspected His Highness Louis's behavior. Having love is a noble character, but maintaining love comes at a considerable cost. Sometimes, it can even be exploited by those with intentions. William felt that he couldn't do it himself. But he can use this sword to guard those who can do this. At this moment, Louis was still unaware that he had already been given the impression of having love in William's heart. He just wants to find that slime at this moment. Fortunately, not long after, he saw a silver-white slime at a stall that digested apples 10 times more than other slimes. Special individuals. William was also somewhat surprised. Generally speaking, slime refers to the unedited slime of LV1. Starting from LV2, slime will be promoted to different categories based on their environment. For example, the corrupt slime of LV2 living in a toxic swamp. For example, wandering in mines, the metal slime is as hard as iron. But special individuals refer to those who are clearly still in LV1 but have already experienced significant alienation. "Do you want to buy it, little brother? We only charge you 5 silver coins. You can take this slime with you at any time." William frowned and said, 500 copper coins. "Are you joking? The seller of this slime is zhaoshuyuan.com. He is a retired adventurer who has lost a leg and is sitting in a chair with a row of exposed teeth that are as white as freshly peeled almonds. He provocatively says, 'Love to buy or not, I can't sell it cheap anyway.'" Louis didn't say a word, just got up again and went around other stalls. As expected, only that slime is more special. Although in the eyes of adventurers, the special is also very limited, and the price is not worth 5 silver coins. 5 silver coins, a poor province in the imperial capital, can live for over a month just to buy an LV1 slime. He also asked some vendors who often set up stalls here and confirmed that the retired adventurer had been setting up a stall here for a long time. He used to be the captain of the hunting team, but when the team had an accident, only he broke one leg and escaped back. A few years ago, he was selling team supplies everywhere to raise compensation for his teammates' loved ones. That slime seems to be a monster that couldn't be sold smoothly at the time, and it has been unsold ever since. Now that he has retired, he might as well sell miscellaneous things in the second-hand market, and this slime will stay. Louis nodded. Confirmed. The information and diary match. He returned to the stall and approached the owner who sold special slime. "Young master, if you want to buy, you can buy it. I won't lower the price. 5 silver coins, you can't lose a penny. Dong, a small money bag fell on the stall. Louis said, here are 29 silver and 12 copper coins, all the money I can use today. I'll take this slime with me. The extra money, just look at what's suitable at the booth and give it to me. Chapter 7. Slim in hand, sword of 24 silver. You are listening at novel full.audio. Louis, of course, was not simply giving away. Although he is not Enshu Grande like the original owner, the money was not brought in by strong winds. The truth is, he recalled the behavior of the original owner ordering a wedding banquet and sending white notes to his subordinates, and decided to overcome the original owner's disdain from now on and develop the habit of spending the money he should. 30 silver is the upper limit he set for achieving his goals this time. On the premise of achieving his own goals, he can freely control the direction of this money, such as sewing and patching up for this less than perfect world. The boss was taken aback and seemed to understand something. After a moment, he took off his sword hanging from his waist and threw it towards Louis, laughing and cursing. Take it, young master. I don't need anyone to sympathize with this old guy. Louis chuckled and caught it, saying, the old sword. I can't use it now, it's just right to sell. Louis glanced twice more and finally said, can 24 silver buy such a handy sword? The boss once again revealed his almond-like teeth, bared his teeth and said with a smile. I can't buy it, but not even a sword can buy a kind heart. Louis nodded thoughtfully and said, I'll keep this sword. I hope it reminds me at all times not to forget my true intention. That's right, young people should be like this. The boss laughed, and after a moment, his gaze slightly narrowed and he said seriously, by the way, I'll give you a reminder. If you want to go on an adventure, I suggest you don't go to the Dragon Bone grassland outside the imperial capital. My leg was lost there. Louis looked at William. William lowered his head and said, that's a resource area outside the imperial capital. The Empire once killed a pure-blooded dragon species there. Is it very dangerous? William hesitated for a moment and said, no, on the contrary, there should be no more threats there. Louis looked at the vendor. The vendor patted his empty pants legs and said bitterly. I used to think the same way. What kind of monster is it? I don't know, it was only when it was full that I had a chance to escape. Didn't you report to the guild? They said they couldn't find it, and later adventurers didn't encounter that, but I'm sure that thing is still there. Louis nodded and said, I understand, I will remember. At the same time, in a room with tightly drawn curtains. A figure curled up into a ball on the big bed on the side near the windowsill, with a clump of messy golden hair hanging by the bed. The dark clouds outside the window dissipated, and a beam of morning light shone through the curtains on the face exposed at one corner of the sphere, causing the bedding to wriggle slightly. Suddenly, the warm voice of the maid whispered. Your Highness Olivia, Your Highness Olivia. A slender arm stretched out and slowly compared to a scissor hand. Sleep for another 2 minutes. 2 hours. With a whoosh, the little blanket was roughly lifted open, and the feeling of floating in the air made the little swan let out an ahem and rolled directly against the head of the bed. A muffled groan sounded. The little swan was wearing a loose top and squatting on the stall, hugging its head and crouching to defend itself. The right shoulder slipped slightly, revealing a slightly slender body bone. Your Highness, you're going to the second-hand market to see slime today, the maid said with a smile on her face. Olivia suddenly thought of something, got up in a hurry, and then her toe hit the table leg, curling up into a ball on the ground, rolling wildly, emitting a mosquito-like mournful cry. Lumi, the maid, it hurts, please help me. The maidservant couldn't bear to watch anymore and carried her to bed to change her clothes. Your Highness, you have been increasingly careless lately. A few hours later. In the second-hand market, a girl with small double ball heads walked lightly, holding 2 small balls, as if she had 2 extra corners on her head, with a touch of innocence and cuteness, as if she had forgotten the pain she had just experienced. "Your Highness Olivia, we have all bought slime from the market." "Ow." The little swan jumped up and straightened its chest, pretending to nod proficiently. "These slimes are of great use to me, and by the way, you should have paid me." The maidservant couldn't help but laugh and cry, "Your Highness Olivia, these are just ordinary slimes, not even special individuals. All that money added up, it's not as expensive as your breakfast." The implication is that there is no reason to default. "That's good, wait a moment." As if she had reacted, Olivia widened her eyes. "Are they all ordinary slimes?" "Yeah, there's not even an evolutionary individual." The maidservant was a bit confused. "What's the problem?" "The problem is too big." "Are you sure there are no special individuals?" Olivia felt the alarm ringing wildly in her mind. Spending money is not a problem. Being able to solve it with money is not a big problem. The special slime of the problem is missing. Olivia muttered to herself that it's not good. The Enshu explosion was not a one-time occurrence. The longer you delay, the harder it becomes to handle. Little Swan originally planned to acquire the slime first, and then send the royal guards to search for evidence of the factory director's crime. He would be ousted first, and then slime would be used to dispose of the accumulated garbage at the treatment plant. Finally, when the new equipment arrived, she could take a step that she didn't recognize and look for Wang Jie's reward with her nose raised. Has it already been acquired by that merchant? Her mind twitched. It's okay. Just spend some money to buy it back from that merchant. However, half an hour later, the maid returned to report. "Your Highness, the merchant insists that he has never bought slime." The little swan jumped and said, "Does he want to raise the price?" "No, there really isn't." Olivia is in a hurry. She remembered the proverb of the Enshu Empire. A butterfly on the banks of the supreme forest river flapped its wings a few times, and in 2 weeks it could set off a tornado on Enshu's border. Is it because she made a change? A big danger word popped out of her head. No, she will never allow Tino's Big Bang to happen again. "Lumi, give me the order to start acquiring slime around the imperial capital, especially slime for special individuals." The little swan clenched its fist and said, "I want everything. As long as the acquisition scope is broad enough, special slime will definitely emerge." Maid Chief. Your Highness Olivia is starting to be petty again. Even if the palace is big, we can't use so much slime. Money is not spent like this. Your Highness, this costs a lot. Your Highness Beatrice will not allow you to use public funds. The maid kindly reminded me. Little Swan, stop making it. Lord Beatrice's night gun will turn your butt red. How could I have thought that my daughter would be silenced with the next sentence? No problem, it's just my monthly allowance. Lumi's mouth twitched slightly. Why didn't she know that the royal allowance was so much? Seemingly understanding the maid's concern, the little swan curled its mouth and said, "Lumi, believe me, these slimes are useful for me to buy." Olivia's logic is very simple. The National Waste Treatment Plant is unable to dispose of elemental waste, and the core issue is the insufficient processing rate. Even if Slim cannot dispose of those high-risk waste materials, it can still handle the household waste of ordinary residents with great accuracy at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, reducing the load on the machines. At that time, all the old instruments will be prepared and fully operational to digest the experimental waste from the White Tower. If you can't digest it all, throw it all away to the slimes for absorption. Slim is a group of highly adaptable monsters. I can digest a little more. Upon receiving the news, Sister Wang should also allocate some funds and place an order with the Supreme Forest half a year in advance. When the equipment is assembled and delivered over there, the possibility of a big explosion is highly likely to disappear invisibly. Even if there is an impact, it belongs to the scope that the imperial capital can bear. But in this way, the prince's training must catch up with the schedule. Let the secret guard investigate that corrupt thief first. How should we handle this matter at the processing factory? Let that guy Louis do the prince trial. That guy's strength is growing rapidly, but he's really brainless in handling government affairs and investigating accidents. If I didn't handle it properly, I, Olivia, will make a grand appearance and shock Wang and the damn country with a little bit of rebirth. Not good. Just imagining that scene made Olivia feel like her brain was completely transparent. How much force should I use to pat Pugua's shoulder and mock him falsely for already working hard? As long as you are not the prince, we cannot be friends either. The maidservant looked at the little swan, whose body was almost wriggling like a caterpillar, sighed, reached out and hugged her waist, walking towards the palace. Does she feel that her queen's illness has worsened, or may she be possessed by demons? How about finding a priest from the God of Glory and Justice tomorrow to drive away evil spirits for the queen? Chapter 8. The beginning of Mutation and Future Diary. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Late at night. Louis, who had already washed himself, returned to his room and looked at the pre-arranged contract formation. He took Slim out of the glass jar and walked into the formation with it. Non-curse-based mages, or sub-professions with special summoning or contract types, are unable to summon or contract monsters beyond their level. Summoning, contracts, or plural contract monsters are the specialties of summoner-type professions in their normal state. If we could just contract casually, then these professions would have been eliminated long ago. So, for ordinary professionals, even adventurers in border towns would not use the only contractual position on Slim. But Louis doesn't care anymore. He is currently at LV1 in his career level and does not have a contract with Slime. What kind of contract does he have? If he doesn't, he can terminate the contract in the future. You're quite well behaved. Louis held Slim's body, feeling like he was holding a football-sized pudding. Cue bullets. Cool. It's quite suitable for relieving heat. And he is very obedient, even if he holds him in his arms, he doesn't resist. He walked into the contract formation and placed the powered magic stone in the center of the formation. At the moment when the formation lit up, Louis felt the faint magic in his body being drawn into the formation below him. Suddenly, he felt something was wrong, and with the injection of his magic, the original contractual pattern gradually twisted. He seemed to smell the smell of gunpowder in his nose, and the magic entwined along the magical circuit gradually ignited a pitch-black flame around him and Slim. As the black flame infused magic into Slim's body, a strange imprint appeared on it and quickly dissipated. Louis frowned and looked at the scene with some surprise. Is this considered a success? He looked at Slim, and at this moment, the silver-white outer film of Slim had already appeared with large black flame patterns, indicating a significant improvement in its appearance. Louis could vaguely feel the faint thought of hunger coming towards him. This is in line with Louis's previous understanding of successful contract signing. Just. How does this contract feel wrong? Location. Presbyterian Church in the Supreme Forest. The elder elf suddenly opened his eyes and instinctively covered his right eye, where a terrifying scar like a centipede ran across half of his face. His right eye was blue and white, indicating that he had lost sight. He covered the already healed wound and let out a cold and mournful smile. It's you again. It's you again. The haunted guy. Location. Headquarters of the God of Glory and Justice Church. The Pope quietly knelt under the statue and prayed. Lord, let me practice your language and experience your way. Walk with you on the path of truth, and the wisdom of glory and justice will come to me. Praise my Lord, and glorify his name in the witness of the stars. I am certain that the blood of the Lord has washed away all my sins. Suddenly, he stopped praying and said, the lingering fragrance of great sin. Is it spreading again? In the depths of the falling star sea, in the bay, a sleeping giant opened its eyes. In the kingdom of dragons, in the bottomless abyss, in the imperial palace of the Enshu Empire. A decree arrived in the hands of Beatrice, who was staying up late to process documents. What? Father is already sober. I'll go over now. At this moment, our protagonist Louis was lost in thought as he looked at the blood-stained diary emitting red light. What's the situation? Previously, he had just signed a contract and placed the cage in Slim's room, sitting at his desk. When he looked up, he found a diary on the bookshelf that looked like a blood-stained diary. Or rather, they are originally the same book. This is the font of the diary that is currently offline. Compared to the blood-stained diary, this diary still has no record. Thinking of the original owner's diary, he suddenly had an impulse to write a diary. Just like the young swordsman who said, "If I had this stick back then, even 10 miles of cauliflower would be headless." Men's interests are sometimes so simple. When he started writing, he even deliberately wrote in Chinese to ensure the confidentiality of his diary. When he was about to send it himself in the future, he announced to the world. "Do you want my treasure? If you want it, you can give it all to me. Go find it. I put all my treasures there," referring to the diary. Perhaps there will be a new incident surrounding this diary later. Then they will find that they can't understand Chinese. The Chinese in his diary is proof that he stayed in this world. Perhaps after thousands of years, a fellow villager will come to this land, accidentally get a diary fragment, and then start a new story. Louis thought, and a smile curved around his mouth. Unexpectedly, at the moment he stopped writing, the diary placed on the bed began to emit a strange red light. Louis was a bit confused, but he still leaned forward and opened the diary that he had traveled through. I saw that the text on the diary was gradually becoming distorted. The text written by the original owner is gradually disappearing. At the same time, the Chinese beginning written by Louis slowly appeared in the diary. No, it's not just the beginning. The content originally written in Enshu's script in the diary has also been replaced with Chinese one by one, accompanied by some changes in the narrative content. Especially when it comes to the parts related to the Tino explosion, there have been earth-shattering changes. It's like through this diary, he saw the future after being rewritten. Wait a moment, wouldn't that mean Louis's eyes lit up and he quickly flipped the content to the last few pages? If the problem of Tino's Big Bang can be dealt with in advance, then he must have already lay flat and enjoyed a happy life in the future. At this moment, the imperial capital is in a sea of laughter, and I have made an indelible contribution to it. Because the Revolutionary Army has put me on the guillotine again. It's still simplified Chinese. Louis. What? Isn't this damn thing completely unchanged? No, it's okay, Louis. You still have time. He can only comfort himself in this way. After taking a deep breath, Louis realized something was wrong. On the blank page at the end of the diary, which was stained red with blood, he saw a strange page of content. You flapped your wings, changed the ending of the Tino explosion, changed the anchor point of history, and brought the world line to a close. You have devoured the remnants of the world line, soul assimilation has been activated, current progress plus 70% affected by the assimilation progress, you have devoured the host's demonic bloodline and unlocked special skills. Energy absorption, race skill, and class spell list energy absorption. When luring the victim into excitement or directly kissing the victim, energy can be absorbed from the other person. Your kiss has a suggestive effect. If the victim fails to pass the judgment, the energy absorption effect will be further enhanced until the victim dies. When you use your tail to inject venom, it is also considered as giving a succubus kiss. List of spells. Venom synthesis, paralysis, phantom, potion, greatness, hint, charm monster. You flapped your wings, rewriting the future of a large chamber of commerce, and transforming its anchor into greedy dependence, bringing the world to a close. Soul assimilation progress increased, current progress. 100%, the heinous crime of greed has revealed that you have engaged in a greedy feast of atrocities. Description: As an apostle of great sin, you greedily plundered the bloodline, life, soul, and existence of this body, and used it as nourishment to reshape your body by searching for the book garden. www.zhaozuiyuan.com. The power of great sin spreads, and greed will extend corresponding skills according to your own will. Skill generation in progress. Greedy thirst for knowledge, passive. You have an endless greed for knowledge that has not been acquired. In the process of acquiring knowledge, your learning ability greatly improves and is unforgettable. When Louis's fingers brushed over the text on the paper, lines of text flew out of the paper and flowed into his body. Louis's mind twitched, and a dim light appeared on his flapping little tail, spreading a force down his spine. His little tail swayed behind him. Louis let out a muffled groan, feeling as if there was magma flowing incessantly inside, melting everything in his body into another existence that perfectly matched his soul. This pain made his body tremble uncontrollably. But he doesn't really dislike a feeling, because he felt his soul cheering and celebrating the return of his own body. The indescribable sense of happiness made his tail sway joyfully, even suppressing the pain. Gradually, the pain subsided and he felt his body warm. How to use the tail to launch an attack. How to cast spells from the list of spell types. The basic usage of greed and thirst for knowledge. Gradually, his face was tinged with an indescribable intoxication and madness. Just like a drunkard smelling sweet wine, Grandette smelled the fragrance of money. Something vaguely bound in the body is being released. Am I promoted to a higher career level? Damn it, there's a hang. Chapter 9. Deep Blue, Let Me See the Limits. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next day, Louis, who had just finished breakfast, received a notice from the female official next to Beatrice. It is said that His Highness has arranged for Lord Olivia to handle the matters related to his teaching, and a carriage will come to pick him up and take him to the palace later. Louis nodded to express his understanding and began to think about a reasonable way to have Beatrice lead him to solve the problem at the processing plant in advance. Thinking and thinking, I unconsciously realized that the agreed time had already arrived. Quickly, he was taken to a clean and tidy open field that had been corrected. Your Highness, please take a moment again. The instructor will come soon. Louis held the book and read for a while, and within a few minutes, a middle-aged man in armor walked over. Louis quickly put down the book. At first glance, this person is stronger than himself, at least Louis did not feel his aura on William, the 11th level Iron Guard, before. Your Highness, Kino Kane, will be responsible for teaching your 9 swords from today onwards. Louis nodded curiously and said. But why didn't I see the sword? Kino paused for a moment before continuing. Because it's not yet time for you to practice swordsmanship. Learn swordsmanship first, learn boxing, figure out how to exert force first, and then consider other things. After speaking, his body remained motionless, only lifting his hand. Louis didn't even see his movements clearly, he only heard a sudden explosion in the air. This is about exerting force, and it's also something you need to master before learning the 9 swords. Louis's eyes lit up with some surprise. Kino, she doesn't seem to like talking too much and starts teaching formally. The first thing taught was the techniques for exercising different muscle groups in different parts of the body, which is somewhat similar to the content taught by previous fitness coaches. He listened attentively and learned quickly. After correcting some of his basic movements, Kino nodded and said. These movements, practice more when you go back, and lay a foundation first. Next, I will teach you the basic movements of the 9 swords match. He just finished 2 sets of movements and felt some muscle soreness, which gave him a boost of energy. I will slow down my movements and break down the moves for you to focus on. Kino's gaze became slightly sharper and he directly showed it. Punch with your right hand. Pull down to open the defense. Bend arm elbow strike. Swipe your fist and feint. Move the cushion, step forward. Kino talked and fought as he spoke. His movements are very slow, but it just makes Louis feel a bit dizzy. This reminded him of a few simple movements when he was taught radio gymnastics by a physical education teacher in his previous life, but when he first saw the teacher complete a whole set of jumps, he still felt that the movements were complex. He tried hard to record the gameplay of each movement, and in this rush, he felt a force steaming in his body, and his brain was clear for a moment. Greedy thirst for knowledge, activated. His brain black hole greedily devours every action he sees. Kino's actions are broken down and replicated in his mind. At this moment, the world seems to have become quiet, and the chirping of insects and birds around it gradually disappears. He instinctively drives his body to move. The movements were replicated in his hands one by one, but perhaps because his muscles were not very obedient to the commands of his brain, there were significant deformations in the movements when they were actually practiced. Kino glanced at him and said, "Have you learned?" "No." Kino shook his head and was about to say something when a soldier ran over and whispered something to him. Kino glanced at Louis. "Let those who have learned practice slowly first." So he spoke to the soldiers a little further away. Louis did not care about Kino's departure, and continued to follow the actions and tactics he had replicated in his mind, gradually moving towards the standard playing style he understood. Is there a missing herdsman around the Longu grassland? It's a safe zone and there are basically no warcraft. It should be a demon rushing down from the burning smoke mountain range. Let the forest rangers take the patrol team to clean it up. Kino pursed his lips and his mood began to become restless. He's not the Iron Guard who always likes to shrink his guard. It's already a bit difficult for him to calm down and teach others. With this time, it's better for him to kill more followers of evil gods. But there's no way. Last year, Tino City was too peaceful, to the extent that he and his wife were a bit reckless at night. Now that his second child is born and the financial pressure increases, he begins to worry. We need to give our child a high enough starting line, but all of this costs money, and by the time we reach retirement age, we are almost emptying him. At this moment, the second Princess Olivia came to her door, hoping that she would serve as a tutor for Prince Louis. Are you joking? He's at least the captain of the royal guards. How could he bring a newcomer who hasn't practiced anything? Does he want face? However, His Royal Highness Olivia, who was sickly and weak, personally begged him, claiming that he was the most skilled in the 9 swords of the royal family. He couldn't help but save face. That's right, it's definitely not because your highness gave too much. To be honest, he teaches people very harshly, and the young members of the SS are all howling. This cute newcomer is naturally, When Kino scanned the young prince expressionlessly, his gaze was somewhat off. Just talking about something, his boxing posture underwent a revolutionary change. His eyes seemed to be unable to focus, but with each punch he made, he had a slightly restrained posture. His arms were slightly spread out, like a cheetah trying to kill the enemy. His slender shoulders trembled slightly, and his abdomen maintained a rhythmic and orderly rise and fall. Sweat wet the hair tips in front of his forehead, dribbling down his cheeks and landing on the ground. It seems that he is not as lazy as His Highness said. He had previously told Olivia that he was too impatient and not suitable for bringing new people who didn't understand anything. At that time, His Highness's response was that Prince Louis was a bit lazy on weekdays. She was ordered to take on the work of developing the prince's training course and must sharpen a good sword for Lord Beatrice. So, the second prince's side hopes that he will practice hard, His Royal Highness. He didn't think so. It's really intense. He's also afraid of those noble crispy chickens getting into trouble. But now seeing Louis's focused posture, he couldn't help but feel a little moved. Although effort is not the only element of success, or even the most important one, it is the only element that ordinary people can control with their own will. Zhaoshuyuan.com, teach a little more seriously, it seems like you can practice a few more times. But the next second, his face changed. Ha! Accompanied by a deep exhalation and inhalation, Louis's feet seemed to be nailed, maintaining a parried posture that remained motionless, like a stationary white jade statue. The next second, on his sweaty clothes, he could vaguely see his slender muscles slightly congested, tense, and wriggling. Give a punch. A dull sound rang out. His body seemed to lose strength instantly, staggering forward. Kino's figure flashed, he pulled, and he straightened Louis, who had lost his strength. You really haven't been taught before, Kino said sullenly. Louis only felt pain in every part of his body, but when he regained his senses, he realized that he was sweating profusely and couldn't even catch his breath. Although it was painful, he couldn't help but laugh and say, "Did you play well?" Kino glanced slightly. "Not bad, I'm getting closer to my younger self." After a moment of pause, he casually said, "You've learned your breathing luck quite quickly." Louis chuckled and said, "It was you who showed enough detail when teaching." After a pause, he said, "The consequence of using this move is too great." Kino has always been quiet and almost couldn't resist swearing for a moment. Why is he so certain that this kid hasn't practiced before? It's not because the fighting style of the previous punch was not recorded in the boxing style of the 9 swords. That was his unique skill that he had been maintaining, so he had no intention of letting Louis learn it. But this kid. Is it a monster? Chapter 10. Women will only affect my sword drawing speed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. That explosive gameplay was adapted by Gino based on the martial monk's secret techniques and adapted to his habit of explosive luck. Over the years, he has made this luck technique a constant part of his body, turning bursts into instincts. His ability to become the captain of the Royal Guard at such a young age is somewhat related to this skill. This thing is useless to ordinary people as soon as they learn it. But he never expected that Louis not only imitated his boxing habits, but also replicated his instinctive breathing skills. Is it inside? It's outrageous. Although he only punched once, a breakthrough from 0 to 1 is even more precious than a breakthrough from 1 to 10. He didn't even have time to teach him. Is that why he was chosen by Lord Beatrice? Kino couldn't help but sigh. He reminded, "Don't use that last punch frequently during practice." Ah. Kino's face was extremely thick, but he remained calm and his heart skipped a beat as he said, "The martial arts of the 9 swords are extensive and profound. Previously, they were only shown to you to make you suffer, not for you to practice directly now. Your current body does not yet meet the foundation for using this technique. When your physical fitness improves, you can strike this punch as you please." Louis nodded. He understands that practicing boxing without practicing martial arts is just a waste of time. Seeing Louis not delving deeper, Kino raised his lips. "I'm not joking. After practicing too much, your body will really have problems. If you don't believe me, you can see." He slapped Louis on the shoulder. A tingling and painful sensation spread throughout Louis's body, causing his tail to stand up and his entire body to stiffen. Kino's eyes showed a proud expression, satisfied with his convulsive expression. "I understand, you're still far behind." After speaking, he demonstrated his normal breathing skills in front of Louis, using similar strength as Louis. "Wave your hands left and right. Elbow strike. High side kick." Under the joy of seeing the game, he displayed a round of various explosive power skills, like a card player who drew a good card from a game king, wishing everyone knew he had this ability. Finally, he stopped and stood in front of Louis with a face full of spring breeze, not even gasping for breath. "Yes. That's right. That's the expression. If becoming stronger is not about pretending to be forced, it will be meaningless. Look at me quickly. Comfortable." Kino had a face full of enjoyment. It took half a year to master the breathing technique, and it took another year to transform it into a shape that suits oneself. What is the result? Some people don't even need him to teach them, they can learn it after just a few readings. Pinch the numbness, don't show off your abilities, I'm afraid it won't be easy to take care of in the future. There are only two things he hates the most in his life. One is having top-notch melee skills that he cannot learn. The second is that the skills he develops and imparts are underestimated by others. Seeing Louis looking at him with a lively expression, his nose was about to perk up. He was in a good mood for a moment and directly carried Louis on his shoulder. Let's go and take you to enjoy some good things, so that you can enjoy yourself after finishing and forget about any soreness. Louis was taken aback and tried to wave his hand. Wait, teach me. I have a fiancé, that kind of place is not allowed. However, in the next moment, his voice was drowned in the strong wind. Knock, Kino's speed seems to have broken through the speed of sound. 10 minutes later Louis looked at him with a resentful expression on his face and let out a strange cry of mmmma. He looked at the nearby Kino teacher with some disappointment and said, "Are you referring to the royal physiotherapy room when you say shuangshang tian? The male therapist, whose arm muscles were thicker than Louis's legs, pressed his fingers on his back and pushed him up. Louis let out another sound, and his tail behind him swung like a whip. Kino said a few more words, which was rare. Otherwise, what do you think? Women only affect my speed of drawing swords. Your child has a strong start today. If the therapist doesn't use the magic of life to massage and repair you, I'll lose if you wake up tomorrow. Take good physical therapy a few times, you should know that this is a treatment that can only be enjoyed by non-commissioned officers and above." Louis was frightened by his serious expression. "Am I seriously injured?" Kino shook his head and said, "No, it's just that if you reach a certain level of cultivation and don't keep up with maintenance, you may fall ill. There is also a ointment specifically designed for treating bruises, swelling, and pain. It's specially available. My group of young men under my command have achieved great success, and I only occasionally bring a few people to use them." Louis nodded. At the next moment, the therapist's palm, coated with cold ointment, pushed hard, and the sour and swollen pain turned into a transparent feeling of both ice and fire. He couldn't help but hiss. The physical pain dissipated, and a sense of relief gradually spread. Along with it came fatigue and drowsiness. At some point, he fell asleep in the therapy room. When I woke up again, there was no one left. At the same time, another spa room near the royal therapy room. The noon sun lazily shines through the glass window, shining on a smooth skin. Several crystal-clear potions were evenly applied to various parts of Olivia, and the tingling sensation made her fall asleep. The warm silk fabric could cover a little below her waist, and a fair and lovely foot was exposed outside the silk fabric. You could vaguely see the restless wriggling of the silkworms like bouncing white toes. This sickly princess, as usual, is receiving treatment from a potion bath. Perhaps it was because this therapy was so comfortable that she was opening her mouth slightly at the moment, and her crystal-clear saliva was slipping from the corner of her mouth. She went to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com and hooked it onto a rubber pillow. Hey. Puzzled country is beaten. Wang Jia praises. Suddenly, a pair of warm towels covered her eyelids. Your Highness, the therapy is over. The steaming heat made the little swan wake up leisurely, barely taking off the towel. With sleepy eyes and a faint hazy milky voice, he said. Ah, it's Lumi. The maid pushed the frame of her glasses and wiped the lenses that had become blurry due to steam. I'll wipe it off for you. By the way, I just met Captain Kino on the road, and he told me about His Highness Louis. When it came to confusing the country, Olivia, who was originally feeling sleepy, yawned. Tell me. Captain Kino is a hellish instructor, and he belongs to the royal guards who stop children from crying at night. She put in so much effort and dragged her sick body out to sell him, just to see how Louis would be disturbed, right? If that kid were to be tossed around twice and voluntarily give up becoming a prince, wouldn't that be beautiful? Only Louis's injured world has been achieved. Speaking of the prince, the voice of the maidservant also became a bit more joyful. Lumi. I heard from Captain Kino that His Highness Louis is too tired to stand up today. Little Swan. Lumi. Captain Kino directly sent His Highness Louis to the Royal Therapy Room, where he spent his treatment money. Little Swan, nodding excitedly. That's really great. I knew that guy wouldn't be able to persist in training. Lumi. Captain Kino said it's because His Highness has made too much progress and worked too hard. Little Swan. Ah. Lumi. Winky face.